Greetings friends. Thanks for stopping by for a visit. If you enjoy the video, please subscribe.
Alright, so I've been lurking on here for a while, reading other people's stories, and I finally braced myself to post this. Honestly, I'm still half convinced you guys are gonna think I'm totally losing it, but I just need to get this off my chest. Plus my brother told me I should post it here to see if anyone else had similar stuff happen. This all took place over like a 3-year period back in the early 2000s. I was around 9 when it started, and my older brother, let's call him Mike, was 12. We lived in this house out in rural Pennsylvania, pretty much right on the edge of these massive, thick woods that went on for miles. It was a great place to grow up as a kid, but looking back, those woods always felt a little too quiet, if that makes sense. Anyway, what happened to us wasn't like a one-time ghost sighting. It was this slow, creeping escalation of things we couldn't explain. We always joked they were gnomes, because of how small they seemed, but trust me, there was nothing cute or fairy tale-like about them. Here is how it all started. It started out so small we didn't even realize it was happening at first. You know how when you're a kid, you just lose stuff constantly? That's what we thought it was. I had these little plastic green army men that I'd leave out in the backyard, and they started vanishing. But then, things got weird. One morning, Mike and I went out by the tree line to build a fort, and we found about 20 of my missing army men. They weren't just scattered, though. Someone had set them up in a perfect, tight circle facing inwards, right on top of a mossy stump. We both accused each other immediately, but Mike looked genuinely creeped out, and I knew I hadn't done it. After that, the pranks started moving closer to the house. We had a screened-in back porch where we kept our muddy sneakers and outdoor toys. Weird stuff would happen overnight. We'd wake up and find all the left shoes lined up neatly against the screen, while the right shoes were completely missing, only to show up days later tucked under the porch steps. The creepiest part of this early phase happened inside, though. Mike had a collection of shiny state quarters on his dresser. One day, he noticed 3 of them were missing. The next morning, we found them sitting on the windowsill right above his bed. They were stacked perfectly on top of each other, and right next to the stack was a tiny, muddy smudge. It looked exactly like a footprint, but it was barely 2 inches long, with distinct, stubby little toes. We tried to tell our mom, but she just scolded us for tracking dirt into the room and told us to stop playing games. But Mike and I knew. Something was coming onto our porch, and maybe even inside, and it was watching us. By the 2nd year, whatever this was stopped being a minor annoyance and started getting aggressive. Mike and I shared a bedroom on the 1st floor, and our window looked straight out into the backyard toward that dark tree line. It started around October. I woke up in the middle of the night to this incredibly distinct sound. Tap. 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 It was coming from the window glass. At first I thought it was a tree branch, but there weren't any trees close enough to touch the house. It was rhythmic, deliberate, and way too low down on the glass, like whatever was doing it was barely reaching the sill. I froze under my blankets, absolutely paralyzed. After a few minutes, it stopped. I didn't tell Mike the next morning because I was embarrassed, but 3 nights later, it happened again. This time, I heard Mike whisper across the dark room, "You hear that too, right?" The tapping became a regular thing, happening maybe twice a week. We tried keeping the blinds shut tight, but that almost made it worse because your imagination just goes wild. The absolute worst night happened right before summer. The tapping woke us both up around 2 a.m., but instead of the usual 3 taps, it was just frantic scratching, like little claws scraping against the glass. Mike, who usually acted tough, snapped. He got this burst of adrenaline, threw off his covers, and crept right up to the window. I begged him to stop, but he ignored me. He grabbed the edge of the blinds and yanked them up. There was nothing there. Just the empty, pitch-black yard. But right when Mike leaned his face close to the glass to peer out, the scratching stopped. Instead, we heard this sound that still gives me goosebumps just typing it out. It was this heavy, raspy, wet breathing. It sounded like an animal with fluid in its lungs, and it was pressed right against the other side of the glass, fogging it up from the outside. We could see the condensation forming on the pane in real time, right where a face should be. Mike stumbled backward and fell onto the floor, totally terrified. The second he hit the ground, we heard a sudden, wet slap against the siding, followed by the sound of something small scurrying off into the dead leaves at a speed that didn't sound human. It was way too fast. We didn't sleep a wink that night, and we kept the window locked tight for the rest of the year. This brings me to the final encounter, which happened during our last summer in that house. By this point, the tension in our house was unbearable every single night. We were exhausted, paranoid, and honestly, our parents thought we were just feeding into each other's overactive imaginations. But everything changed in late July. It was around 1 a.m., and a massive thunderstorm had just rolled through. The rain had stopped, but everything outside was dripping, and the air was super thick and humid. Mike and I were both awake, just staring at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable tapping to start. Suddenly, there was this incredibly loud thud against the back porch door. It wasn't a tap or a scratch, it sounded like something heavy had been thrown, or like something had literally thrown itself against the wood. It was so loud it shook the window frame. Mike didn't hesitate this time. He was so fed up with being terrified in his own house. He grabbed this heavy, metal mag-light flashlight he kept under his bed, the kind that takes 4D batteries and weighs like a club, and whispered, "Come on." My heart was in my throat, but I couldn't let him go out there alone. We crept down the hallway, completely silent so we wouldn't wake our parents, and unlocked the back door. The cool, damp air hit us as we stepped out onto the wooden deck. The backyard was pitch black, and the woods looked like a solid wall of shadow. We stood there for a few seconds, listening. Everything was dead quiet, except for the dripping water from the gutters. Then, we heard a faint, wet rustling down by the garden beds right next to the porch stairs. It sounded like something dragging itself through the damp mulch. Mike lifted the heavy mag light and whipped the beam of light straight down into the garden. For maybe 2 or 3 seconds, the light caught it perfectly. I wish I could say it was a raccoon or a stray dog, but it wasn't. It was this short, humanoid creature, maybe 2 or 2.5 feet tall. Its skin was this sickly, leathery gray-brown color, and it looked completely naked except for what looked like filthy, matted burlap or rags wrapped around its waist. But the face is what's burnt into my brain. It had no hair, a tiny flattened nose, and these huge, bulbous eyes that caught the flashlight beam and reflected this eerie, yellowish-green glow, exactly like a cat's eyes in the dark. The worst part was its mouth. It didn't look human. It split open into this sickeningly wide, toothy grin that went almost ear to ear. It looked completely manic, like it was thrilled it had finally scared us face to face. The second the light hit it, the thing let out this sharp, low hiss, like a pissed-off possum, and scrambled backward on all fours. It didn't run like a person, it moved with this jerky, spider-like speed, throwing its limbs out in a way that looked totally unnatural. It melted into the thick brush by the tree line before Mike could even track it with the beam. We bolted back inside, slammed the door, and locked it. We didn't even say a word to each other. We just sat on the floor of the kitchen with the flashlight on until the sun came up. That was the first and only time we ever actually saw it, and honestly, it was more than enough. We ended up moving away about 3 months after that night. It wasn't because of the gnomes or whatever they were. My dad just got a better job offer in Ohio, and we packed up and left. Honestly, it felt like a massive weight was lifted off our shoulders the day the moving truck pulled out of that driveway. For years, Mike and I never talked about it. It was like this unspoken rule between us. I think we were both just trying to convince ourselves that we had shared some kind of weird, collective childhood hallucination. But last month, Mike came over to my place, we cracked open a few beers, and out of nowhere, he brought it up. He looked at me and said, "Do you still think about the thing in the garden?" We sat there for hours going over every single detail. It was honestly a relief to hear him describe the exact same leathery skin, the reflective cat eyes, and that horrible, wide grin. We weren't crazy. We both saw it. I'm posting this here because I'm genuinely hoping someone might have some answers. I've spent hours Googling things like Pennsylvania woods creatures or burlap gnomes, but everything that comes up is just old folklore or cute fairy tales. What we saw wasn't a fairy. It felt malicious, or at least totally unnatural. So, has anyone else who grew up near the woods in PA, or anywhere else, really, ever experienced something like this? Did things go missing from your porch? Did you ever hear that wet, heavy breathing on your window? Please tell me we aren't the only ones who have encountered these things.
Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more stories like these, please like and subscribe.